So welcome to Assent, Dissent, everybody. I am one of the hosts, Brandon Diaz.
And I'm Sean Strong.
Okay, and you know what we do here. We do politics, current events, and pop culture. So we will go ahead and dive right into the first topic. Okay, everybody, joining us today is the great Julian Mack. He is an activist, and he is a candidate for the Toledo City Council. And I am so very pleased to have him. So welcome, Julian.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here, brothers.
I feel like I've officially made it big time since I was able to get you on the show. So to start off, are you seeking appointment to a district seat or for the election to an at-large seat?
So I'm seeking appointment, right? And I'm seeking appointment ideally at large. I think it makes a difference to represent, to have somebody with progressive beliefs to represent the entire city. However, I'm not ruling myself out of accepting a district position also. I mean, I think both are an honor, but I fully intend to seek an at-large position this time next year. And so really whatever capacity the Honorable Judge Pufenberger sees it best for me to be appointed to, I'm willing to accept. But I think we have worked hard as a community to make sure we have at-large representation. And I think there's a tendency to discourage Black folks from running at large, frankly. And I don't accept the notion that just because it's easier to, or I wouldn't even say it's easier, but just because it's, a kind of a shorter path to connect with Black voters as opposed to the whole city, say for districts 1 and 4, that's the path that is best for me, right? I think that it's important to have progressive views and represent the entire city, not just a part of the city that has a lot of Black folks. Right? I think that there's enough progressive white folks in our community that value the same type of ideals I do as well, and want representation with those progressive values as well. So I am seeking and kicking off my campaign now for at large. And I do realize that that's an uphill climb. I realize the struggle that a lot of first-time candidates have with that. And that's why we're getting started now.
So what do you feel are your qualities that makes you the best candidate? Because I know that there was something like 111 applicants for right now for the appointed positions. And of course, there will be those people that also run for next year's election. So what do you feel that you offer that makes you the best candidate above the rest of them?
One of my experience in Toledo, I've been in Toledo 33 of the 35 years of my life. And even those other 2 years I was around Toledo, I was going to school in Bowling Green, right? Many of the positive attributes about me I've learned from my community, and many of the negative attributes about me I've learned from my community. I've spent a lot of time in Toledo with a large cross-section of Toledoans. I'm somebody that's deliberately never been okay or satisfied with fitting in any type of one particular box. And through that diversity of experiences, I think gives me an opportunity to serve a diverse group of Toledoans, and so combining all of those experiences together, I think gives me a heart and a love for Toledoans no matter what their social status is, their station in life, I love them because they are just like me and just like people in my family. And I have a heart for really trying to help them. And I think that's what makes me stand out a little bit.
Okay. So if you are elected and or appointed, what would you say are the top 3 issues that you want to take up during your tenure on the city council?
Yeah. So 3 issues that I've already been putting in work on already. Right. So since 2014, I think is my birth as an activist. I credit the seeds from the live streams of the protesters in Michael Brown really is what got me out on the streets. And since then, there's been legislation, right? And to also add on top of the last question, I've never served in an official capacity on city council, but my name is on 3 pieces of legislation that has passed already. And it's in 3 different areas. So safety reconstruction, environmental justice, and anti-corruption are the 3 areas. And I'll kind of give you the past, present, and future of each of them. Safety reconstruction, we know that we've had a failed war on drugs. We know that has disproportionately affected brown and black and poor folks. And we know oftentimes that's been a war on weed. And so I think this was 2014, I partnered up with some people for the Sensible Toledo initiative, which decriminalized marijuana in the Toledo Municipal Code, I think up to 99 grams, right? And no fine, no time, I think was the slogan for that. And so that's actual legislation that passed. What I hope to do with that in the present, also the body cams, we were able to lobby for more body cams, which, I think is a good thing. But in the present and in the future, I think we need to take more radical action. If we look at the municipal budget, 84 million of our tax dollars, 1/3 out of every dollar is spent on policing. And, I think it's painfully obvious with the violence that we've seen over the past 2 weeks in Toledo, the police aren't keeping us safe, right? It's just not happening. And I wouldn't even say that it's all their fault, but the role and how we look at safety and crime prevention has to change, right? If you look at Hurricane Katrina, right? Even if you look at some of the, if you look at these floods that happen, right? Environmental harm, if you look at the water crisis here in Toledo, environmental harm has a disproportionate, greater effect on those on the margins: Black, brown people, poor people, older people, children. So if we don't make environmental justice a priority, it's going to have a greater impact on those that can least afford it. All right. And then on top of that, in the present, I think we need to do more to protect our children from lead. From lead, right? It's ridiculous. We're still having to deal with this issue. And then lastly, anti-corruption legislation. Move to Amend is really a short for Move to Amend Citizens United, right? Which is the Supreme Court case that declared corporations as people, right? And really pops the top on a whole litany of issues with dark money in our political system, And so one of the things that does is every year, and we're working on this being done this year still, to make sure that that law that we worked so hard for in 2016 is upheld. But people testify each year in front of the city council on the impact that money is having on politics, right? And so in 2016, I helped that pass. And now I think we need to move further. And I think it's imperative that we move towards publicly funded elections. Look, we got a problem on the local level, the state level, and the federal level of corruption. It's directly connected to, in every single one of these instances, they've used examples of, oh, it's just campaign contributions. Oh, I was just fundraising. I don't care if you're talking about Tyrone Riley, Larry Householder, or Steve Bannon. All those things are in common. It only makes sense for us to change the culture. And the only way that's going to happen is when we take away the really the finance, when we change the culture and we take away the impact that money has on our elections. Just because you have more money doesn't mean that your voice should be louder, or you should have a more impactful impact on a politician in regards to their election, right? We have to level the playing field. And the best way to do that is with publicly funded elections. So that's my 3-point platform. I know it took a minute, but I've been thinking a lot about it, and there's work that I've already done, and I hope to build upon that.
All right, and Julian, so for the last question is where can people find information on how to support your campaign, on how to support, activism, your efforts here in the city? All right.
Yeah. I want to be a 21st century candidate and run a 21st century campaign. I think that there are some things that we should have learned from our predecessors. And I hope, in my experience organizing, right, the goal is to organize yourself out of what you do. Right? So if you effectively organize well enough, there won't be a need for that activist role anymore. Right? Mm-hmm. I think a big problem that we see in general with the, dare I say, nonprofit industrial complex is that there's a lot of people in these positions that may make 6 figures a year that have no interest in actually solving the societal ills that exist because they profit off of holding a position that's supposed to address them. Mm-hmm. That's a problem. And we're entrusting people to solve these problems that aren't as connected with them as I think they portray that they are. So here's what I want to do. I want to organize and continue to organize myself out of my activist position. I have had some failures as an activist, right? Where I haven't always known where to direct the energy, who to put pressure on, and how to most effectively put pressure on those people. I hope to use the knowledge that I have from, to quote Hamilton, being in the room where it happens, to empower other activists, right? And so what you will see on my website, if you go to macforus.com, is a place to sign up for what we're calling Mactivists, right? And listen, it is very reminiscent, and what I want it to be like is a grassroots version of all of the volunteers that we had on the Obama campaign. I want it to be a grassroots version of Bernie Bros and Bernie Women, you know what I mean? And I want it to be, or the K-Hive. Let's just go there, the K-Hive, right? And I want people, because there is a level of engagement with younger people and millennials that is there. I know it. You've seen it, and I've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of folks get frustrated around election time because that's the only time that political figures engage with them.
Right.
And so I want to create a coalition of people who are ready to be engaged all year round throughout the political process. And those will be activists. And hopefully we can accelerate the change. I don't plan on being on city council for three terms or all of that. I want to make room for the next person. I want to help mentor the next person. So I am running a people-driven campaign, right? And for the people, by the people. And so I want to be accountable to the people. I'm not taking money from any of those places. And so I do need your help with fundraising, right? Or I want to get rid of this part of the campaign. I believe the person with the best ideas should win the election, right? And I'm going to do everything I can do to change that in the future. But for now, I do need money to run this progressive campaign because there are people that don't want to see a progressive vision and future for Toledo. So you can donate by going to macforus.com. You can be a monthly donor. Right now, the average donation the average donation that we've received is $26.70, right? And we've had people from all different backgrounds donate to the campaign over these first 3 weeks. And I absolutely love it because I know it's people who've never donated to a campaign before. Like I got a campaign donation today on Cash App for $5, right? You type in Mac for Us in Cash App, you can donate to the campaign. So I believe that the reason why I got involved in activism is I believe that it was important for me to be an active participant in my own survival and an active participant in my community's flourish. And that's exactly what I hope people do with this campaign is they can become an active participant, not just stand on the sidelines, but be an active participant and making Toledo a better city and subsequently be an active participant in seeing Toledo glow up and being the best city possible. So thank you for letting me be part of it.
Julian. Thank you.
I'm your host, Sean Strong, and tonight I have three lovely ladies joining me for a continuation of the Black Lives Matter movement and some things that's just going on in the community right now. Joining me from Chicago, Illinois is Dr. Leila Ellis-Nelson, who is a professor of psychology at Roosevelt University. Mm-hmm. And we also have joining us from Houston, Texas, Mrs. Angela Joseph, who is an entrepreneur and a community activist. And finally, we have Erin Ann from Hollywood, Maryland. She is a mom, an advocate, a military spouse, and the latest feature from the Democratic National Convention with military support. So it was really good to see her on that stage and on that platform. For those of you listening by podcast and not watching the YouTube show, I do want to put this note in your brain. Dr. Nelson is an African-American woman, and Mrs. Joseph and Erin are both Caucasian females. That'll add to our discussion. So last episode, guys, we talked about the Black Lives Matter movement and some things that were going on. We talked a little bit with a young lady by the name of Ruth Leonard from Toledo, Ohio, who's a local activist here. Just some thoughts about how she felt. I want to talk with you three regarding some things on a much larger scale and the way this movement is going nationally and even globally. One of the things that I saw, and of course I shared with you, was a meme that was sent to me by one of my more conservative friends. And the meme lists 5 Caucasian people who were considered murdered in cold blood. And the question is, did their life matter? So you have Cannon Hennon, who was 5 years old, John Shockley, Nicole Merrill, Veronica Baker, and Nathan Garza. These were all shot by African-American suspects. And the argument from the conservatives are basically there was no national outrage, there was no protesting, no rioting. It wasn't really covered by the news because, of course, mainstream media is trying to separate and divide our country on the basis of race, which is why they never show these events. So I have a little bit of background because I had to do some research here on these persons. And what I found is this, which I think is very interesting. In the case of Cannon Hennett in North Carolina, Darius Sessoms, who was the alleged suspect and perpetrator, was arrested the next day and charged with first-degree murder. In the case of John Shockley from Indianapolis, Indiana, he was murdered on August 12th. On August 15th, Sammy Tenon was arrested and charged with murder. Nicole Merrill from Nashville, Dennis Stone was the perpetrator. He turned himself in and was charged with murder, first-degree assault, 12 counts of first-degree wanton endangerment. In the case of Veronica Baker from North Carolina, Devin Cordell Jones was the murderer. She was murdered on Saturday. He was arrested the following Wednesday. Despite being the only person believed responsible, according to The Sun, they also arrested 3 other people, Kishara Deans, Naziah Collins, and Tyreek Rogers. What's interesting about that case is that Kishara Deans has the highest bail at over $1 million, and she's not the person that was responsible for shooting Veronica Baker. And then finally, Nathan Garza in California, Christopher Young was arrested less than 24 hours later, according to ABC San Francisco. And according to the Times Herald, another report says he was arrested less than an hour later of shooting Nathan Garza. Again, these are the Black perpetrators that killed these white persons and when they were arrested. Now, if we flip over to the Black community, we can go back to Trayvon Martin, who was shot by George Zimmerman in Florida on February 26th, was not charged with murder until April the 11th, and was not taken into custody until June the 3rd. Ahmaud Arbery, we come to current times in Georgia, was shot on February 23rd. Gregory McMichael and his son Travis McMichael were not taken into custody until May 7th. And William Bryan, who was the third suspect, was named on April 7th, but not taken into custody until February 21st. Tamir Rice, the young man who was shot in Ohio by Timothy Loman, was never charged in his murder. He shot Rice within seconds of getting out of his car, according to a report, and has since tried to apply for another job as an officer with the Bel Air Police Department. Their police chief, Mr. Flanagan, said, quote, "This case is over and done with, and he believes he should have a second chance because he was cleared of any wrongdoing." The Cleveland Police Department, where Mr. Loman was employed, fired him for lying on an application based on the Independence Police Department, who dismissed him because they deemed him unfit to serve. Mind you, he shot Tamir Rice when he served with the Cleveland Police Department. Then we come to present day with George Floyd. And these are just a few examples. In Minnesota, I think this is probably the quickest arrest I've seen. May 25th is when he was shot. And on May 29th, Derek Chauvin was charged and taken into custody. I believe taken into custody. I'm not 100% sure about that. And then it wasn't until June 3rd that they upped his charges to more serious charges. And when we look at Jacob Blake, Rusty Shesky, Jacob Blake, the latest one, in Kenosha, Wisconsin, has not been arrested. So, while our conservative friends share that meme, it seems to be that at least there are some discrepancies, and when people who are the assailant or the perpetrator, the timeline of when they get arrested and they get charged versus the other way around. Anybody want to take that?
Sure.
Okay.
That's the point for rioting and marching and holding people accountable. It's if the system of law enforcement isn't going to do it, then the public is going to stand up and advocate for the equitable treatment of people who have been historically marginalized and oppressed in a system that was never designed to protect them in the first place. So the meme is, it's sent purposefully to create an issue where they're going out of their way to purposefully misunderstand the point. It's if all these Black and brown, indigenous, non-Black persons of color are continuously killed, maimed, and harmed by the very people who are literally paid to protect them without any recourse. And when they are arrested and are charged, whole police forces will stand out front of their homes to make sure that they're okay. Their captains, they will parade every single person that they've ever come in contact to tell you how much of a great person that they are, to hopefully get some leniency. How this was an issue about training, or they were afraid for their lives. But at the end of the day, if you're that afraid, why are you a police officer? Why would you choose to be in a position of authority where you would purposefully have to put yourself in harm's way in order to protect the best interests of safety and the sanctity of other people, if you are too afraid to actually do that job? But then again, that fear only comes about when somebody is my complexion, and when that person is historically been part of a group of people that have been marginalized and brutalized. If anything, the police weren't started to actually protect anyone. They were started as slave catchers. So when you think historically about the roots or the origin story about the law enforcement system in the United States of America, it was literally never designed to make sure that people that look like me or identify in the same way that I do actually receive that, veil of protection. So yes, the marching and the rioting are purposeful because it's a call to be seen as human and not 3/5. It's a call to receive equitable treatment because equality is bullshit. It's a call to ensure that there is a purposeful understanding about why the difference in understanding of the protections outlined by some are going to be different than others because you weren't here for me in the first place. And the reason why people are so quick to share these memes is because they actually don't want to deal with the privileges that they've been afforded simply for being born in a body that doesn't look like mine. It's a lot easier to place the blame on something that you can't tangibly touch than it is to acknowledge how you've been complicit in the deaths and murders of millions and countless people, and how your attitudes and beliefs will continue to allow you to be complicit, but the privilege in itself will protect you from having to actually deal with the accountability and the responsibility of it. So share your memes all day, but like you said, those folks were arrested and charged with the most serious charges that they can get, all in less than a week, most of them within 24 hours. The rest of these police officers or white folks go home, they have lunch with their family. What's his name? Kyle Rittenhouse goes back home, tells the cop what he does, gets a cool drink of water, and is back home in bed before it gets too late in the afternoon. But then again, we're supposed to give second chances when you've actually taken the life of someone who'll never get a chance to do anything again? Absolutely not. So.
Do you believe, let's go with you, Aaron. Do you believe that if there were no video captures of the shooting of these African Americans by white cops, or if there was no marching and protesting, that these officers would have ever received any type of discipline or even charges would have even been brought against them?
Nope. I mean, it doesn't really need more than just a nope. If there wasn't accountability, the answer would be no. I'm definitely a white woman. I mean, look at me. But I'm also a citizen of Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. My grandmother was a victim of Indian boarding school. my ancestors were driven out of Mississippi. But I'm not, while I am a Native American woman in paperwork and I can claim that title, I'm a white woman. Look at me. There would be no accountability because the reality is that not only has American history intentionally marginalized Black people, it's marginalized all people of color. Definitely Black people have experienced the worst of it. And I'm not going to deny that. I'm certainly not arguing that. But there have been court cases that have said Black Americans aren't worth as much. Native Americans aren't worth as much. The Oliphant decision, which, and I do admit I'm much more familiar with Native American history than I am Black history for obvious reasons. But the Oliphant decision in the Supreme Court said that if a white person commits a crime on a Native American reservation, Indian tribes can't charge them. That was a Supreme Court decision in the 70s. This isn't long ago. If there was not visible proof of the atrocities committed against Black Americans in particular, there would be no repercussions at all. People have been getting away with this since the dawn of our country. That's just how it is. White people kidnapped the Black people from Africa and brought them here, and there were no repercussions. Our country was founded on genocide and slavery. And if you don't explore that in light of what is currently happening, you cannot realize how white people are not going to be held accountable, especially those in law enforcement.
Okay. There was a Facebook friend of mine named Adam James who shared this basic narrative of the Jacob Blake incident, which is really kind of where we're at right now in America. He's not even the latest one as of the recording of this episode. There have been at least 2 or 3 more incidents of which time and my emotional state and capacity would not allow me to even investigate and look up those, because at this point, I'm just a little emotionally exhausted. But he shares this in layman's terms, the narrative of what happened with Jacob Blake. And he says, so Jacob wrestled 3 cops with a knife on him. No way the cops would pat him down first to see if he had a weapon like they always do. Then let him get up with knife in hand, in parentheses, and followed him with 2 guns pointing at him. Never mind, he heard his kids screaming in the car. And then he puts in parentheses, as a Black father, he couldn't have been concerned for his kids because Black men do not take care of their kids. Jacob Blake was believed on this day he could dodge bullets, go to his car, and get a bigger knife so he could stab cops with guns pointing at him. His little knife he had on him wasn't good enough to stab the cops during their quote-unquote tussle. It's truly brilliant that he would bring a knife to a gunfight. It makes sense. No way a cop with 5 weapons on them could protect themselves from this Jacob. This quote-unquote criminal deserved to be shot in his back because most wars are won by stabbing people with guns. He got what he deserved. So that's his satirical approach to basically what ended up happening. And I guess my question is, how believable do all 3 of you think that whole narrative with Jacob Blake is with the officers? I mean, he had a knife on him. They tased him, which failed. Then they let him walk to his car, reach in to grab something. We don't know if it was a knife or it was a gun. Some videos that captured the event zoomed in and showed that he had a knife, possibly, and he walked away with the knife. And other people are saying that he grabbed him by the back of his shirt and then shot him. There was a young lady in one article that I read who said she had asked if she could get the kids out of the back up seat of the car while this was going on, and the female officer told her no, this was handled. Angela, we haven't heard from you. What are your whole thoughts about the whole Jacob Blake incident and ordeal? Like, what comes to mind when you think of that?
Well, whenever you said, how plausible is it? I really think that plausibility of it comes from your vantage point. And by and large, white people believe that when something happens with a Black individual, that they were doing something wrong. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I've seen this one meme shared that said, it's kind of funny that police will leave you alone if you're not doing anything wrong. And it's just like, have y'all never hung around any Black people? Because no, they don't leave you alone if you're Black. I mean, that's just how it is. And I was just talking to my husband about this earlier. There are a lot of different groups within, white people. And there's one group that really, they might have a good heart, Sean, they might really not be racist themselves, which I was, explaining to them that there's a quote that says, in a racist, I think Angela Davis said it, in a racist society, it's not enough to not be racist. You have to be anti-racist. And so you can't just say, I'm not racist, and that'd be good enough. You can't just not be racist and that'd be good enough. You have to actively work against systemic racism, institutional racism, systemic oppression that's going on. If you do not, as the sister said earlier, you are at least complicit with it. At best, white people are complicit with racism, at very best, if you are not actively fighting against racism. And so I say that to say this, that there are white people that they think that they're not racist, but whenever they hear about a Black person being murdered by a cop or being shot at by a cop or whatever, they immediately think, well, what were they doing wrong? Whereas when a white person gets shot by a cop, or you hear about a white kid getting shot or something like that, it's just like a swift kick in the gut. But because it's Black people, they're like, well, they had to have been doing something wrong. And that goes back to, the documentary 13th covered it. Like, white people have basically been programmed to believe that Blacks are criminals. I distinctly remember growing up and being in cars with older people, and when a Black person would walk by, they would lock the doors, or they would clutch their purse, or whether it is consciously or subconsciously, white people by and large assume that Blacks are up to something no good, they're criminals, they're thugs, they're all these words that our president so lovingly assigns to them, like they're these things that words that we use to attribute to the Black community. And I honestly think that if you think that that's plausible, it's been amazing to me, Sean, how many ways I've heard whites justify situations. I mean, you didn't even mention the one that happened here in Dallas. I'm trying to think of the Botham Jean.
Yeah, I was thinking about both of them, John.
Yeah, John, yeah. He literally, she walked into the wrong apartment, pulled her gun, and murdered him while he was eating ice cream. And
well, everybody, that's all the time that we have today on this show. But please don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We are at Assent_Dissent. Join the conversation, be a part of the topics. And hey, you can always catch bonus footage on either one of those mediums. Again, I'm Sean Strong with
Brennan Diaz. That was new. Anyways, y'all have a good night. See you next week.